Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us and happy Tuesday to you. We're going to talk about a very important topic today, which is your critical assets. And it's a topic that means something different to about every agency that I've talked to, depending on kind of how your agency classifies what critical assets you want to track and the dollar amount that you consider a critical asset. So we'll kind of get into all those things. And as far as PS Tracks goes, you can cover any asset that you'd like to. So we'll touch on a couple different assets and different types that you can track and how we maintain those and keep the history for them. But before we get started, as Liz mentioned, we always like to launch a few polls just to get a little information about you guys and kind of who we're speaking with, so I can tailor the presentation a little bit further. So Liz, if you don't mind launching those. Great, thanks. So we'll leave these up here for maybe 15 seconds or so, if you don't mind just filling those out, kind of what department you're with, if you're using PS Tracks currently, how you're tracking your critical assets right now, and then in terms of the value of the assets you're tracking, what's the total dollar amount of those? So we'll give that, let's say, 5 more seconds here. All right, Liz, if you want to close that off, that'd be great. And if you can share the results, perfect. So it looks like a good mix of folks today between paid, volunteer, and combination. Everyone's using PS Tracks right now, so that's great. I hope I'll be able to share some tips and tricks that maybe you haven't seen before. How are you currently tracking critical assets? So about 43% are using PS Tracks right now, so they have our critical asset module, and the other ones are using paper and spreadsheets currently. And then in terms of the value of the assets you're tracking, kind of a mix here. About 30% under $50,000, another 30% between $50,000 and $250,000, and then 43% above 1 million. So that's great. Thanks everyone for doing that. And I'll be able to kind of touch on some different areas based on the things you just shared. So let's go ahead and get rolling here. I'll share my screen and hopefully you can see that okay. Again, today we're going to talk about tracking and managing all those different critical assets you have. Most of the folks on the call today are familiar with PS Tracks, but we have 7 different modules. And so the one we'll really kind of focus on today is our critical asset module. And when we speak with departments and agencies about their critical assets, if they're doing it the old-fashioned way on paper or spreadsheets, or even maybe using outdated systems that they have, sometimes it can be a little bit chaotic, and maybe you've experienced this a little bit. And these are some of the common challenges that we typically hear from agencies when they're referring to just some of the obstacles they're having tracking critical assets. So I'll point out a few of these. These are some common ones that I hear most often. Missing equipment. So, where did my assets go? That's a big one. So knowing where they're assigned to and just keeping track of, where they're located. Being able to have accurate budgets and forecasting of your assets. And that really ties into expiration dates. So how do we, know what assets are expiring and when they're expiring? So as we're doing our budgeting and our planning, we can accurately predict what we need to basically replace according to that. Another one is communication breakdown. So if an asset breaks or something goes wrong with it, how do we notify the right people in the organization that we have an issue with that asset? And vice versa, once we report the issue, how do the administrators report back to the crews with updates and notifications about what's going on with that asset? So we'll talk about that. Another big one is just histories and logs, of all the different events that occur. Today I'll show some examples on hydrants. So if you want to track flow tests or annual hydrant inspections, things like that, all the history that goes along with your assets. Hose, for example, your annual hose testing, radios, maybe software updates on your radios, for various EMS equipment. A lot of times there's calibration events that you need to complete. So there's really is a lot of different aspects that go into tracking your assets. And another big one, for any of you that might have grant funded equipment, typically with that grant funded equipment, you're required to do an audit. Usually it's once a year. Sometimes it's more frequently, but usually once a year, you have to do an audit and report back to the grant of where your equipment is and what the status of it is and where it's assigned currently. So all those things are various challenges that we help with and will help streamline for you. This is what PS Tracks looks like. And again, a lot of the folks on the call are familiar with the system, but it is an all-in-one system. So if you don't have the critical asset module right now, we can turn that on for you. And from a crew member's perspective, it basically adds another box to their home screen. All the data, again, like our other modules, is in the system. So you can report on it, you can export it or print it if you ever need to. You can track issues, which I was just referring to. So when things break or aren't working properly, the crew members can set alerts to notify the appropriate administrators in your department. And it is a cloud-based system, so you can use any device you want. If your agency has already invested in certain hardware or certain technology, like iPhones or iPads or computers, tablets, toughbooks, whatever it might be, you can just use the same devices that you already have. One nice thing about a lot of critical assets is they will usually come from the manufacturer with a QR code or a barcode. So if you'd like to utilize that functionality in the system, you certainly can. And finally, you always own your own data. So we host it for you in our hosted services data centers, but you always have full access and full ownership of your data. All right, so again, here's our 7 modules. You can pick and choose what you'd like to use. Today, we're gonna dive into the critical asset module. And from a high level, this is what the critical assets module does. So it allows you to log any event that you'd like on your assets, and we can create custom events for whatever you would like to track. Some common ones, as I've mentioned, are inventory checks. You'll have repairs, and then you'll have asset specific events. I touched on a few already, but like for hose, your annual hose inspection. For ladders, you might have a ladder inspection. Pumps, your pump inspections, your hydrants, flow tests, and maybe an annual hydrant inspection. So whatever events that you guys consider important and you want to track in your history and your logs, we can create those events by the type of asset that you want to track them for. We also help you find the equipment. So what's nice is when a event gets logged, we also log the location of where that event was completed. So if a crew member does an inventory check and they say, hey, my radio is here on engine 1 or here on medic 1, then as an administrator, you can go in and see that's where it was last located. Or if a crew member goes in and does an inventory check and that asset is missing, you can actually be notified as an administrator that that asset is in the wrong location. And I'll show you all these functionalities in the system in a moment. You can assign gear and assets either to a vehicle, a location, or a person, depending on how you need to assign them. Obviously, the full history of all the different events is in the system. So you can go in at any point, especially if there's an audit or if there's an accident and you're required to provide the records for a particular asset, you can go in and just download that history and you can see it at any point. All your checks we can build into the system. So for some of your assets, there's NFPA checks, OSHA checks that are required to be completed. So obviously we load those in, but any other agency specific checks that you want to track, our build team will load those in as well. Expiration dates for your assets. So again, when you're budgeting and planning, you can see what's expired and plan to replace that. A lot of our departments will do it in phases, right? Because sometimes replacing one asset across the board is pretty expensive. So they might say, okay, our radios are going to be expired in 3 years. So we're going to start replacing those and buying some every 6 months just to kind of have smaller bills along the way. And then in 3 years, we'll retire the old ones and just have our new radios. Cost tracking. So in addition to the initial cost you paid for an asset, we also track the ongoing maintenance cost of each asset. So if you have repairs or if you send any assets out to vendors, for example, hose testing is a common one that you might send out to a vendor. Those type of events you can log costs and repair costs for and track that in the history of the asset. And finally, the funding source. So, whether it's a grant funded asset or maybe an asset from your county or the city, you can track where each asset is originally from and filter on that. So if you ever have to provide an audit or a report back to that entity, you can quickly do that. All right. One nice thing about PS Tracks, if you haven't worked with us before, is we operate a little bit differently. A lot of software programs that you purchase, they will require you to actually set up the software yourself and learn it and do all the testing and the training. And typically, depending on your bandwidth, that can take a few months. And for some agencies, it turns into shelfware is what I call it, where it actually never gets rolled out. Here at PS Tracks, we actually build the entire system for you. It's a turnkey solution. So basically, you just email us your asset list with all of your inventories on it. And then our team will import it into the system. We'll set it all up. We configure the software for you and train you at the end. And that is a guaranteed process that we do within 4 to 6 weeks is kind of the average timeline. After the initial implementation, again, as you all know, with any software program, there's always changes that need to be made along the way. And typically with other software systems, you have to pay an additional fee, like a per hour fee, to have help with that. With PS Tracks, all the changes are included. So for example, if you buy a bunch of new assets and your vendor sends you over a spreadsheet with all the assets on there, you can load those in yourself into the system if you'd like to, or if you don't have time or don't want to deal with it, you can just send those over to the PS Tracks build team, and our employees will help load that into the system and get it all set up for you. So not only configuration changes to the system, but any operational changes like that, if you need to add or remove crew members, if you want to, edit your checklist or maybe add new events to track, those are all things you can do yourself in the system with the right permissions, or just call us up and we're here to help you with it. Finally, here's a little bit about PS Tracks. We were founded in 2009. We're privately owned and based in Littleton, Colorado. We work with about 650 customers now. That needs to get updated on this slide. But we have a 98.5% renewal rate with our clients, which is something we're really proud of. And I think that speaks not only to the system itself, but also to the customer support that we provide. So with that, I think, Liz, I will pause for a second as I hop over here to the demo site, but are there any questions I can help with so far?
Yeah, we have one, Ryan, and that is, how hard is it to load those new assets ourselves, and how long would it take PS Tracks to do it for us?
Yeah, great question. And I can show you that in the system. You can do it yourself really quickly. You just go into the settings essentially, and you can add either one item or multiple items. But our team does it really fast. Usually it's within a day turnaround. If our team is having a busy week, it might be 2 days, but generally we get those in the system really quick for you. So if you do want to send them to our team, that's about how long it takes. Thanks, Liz. Any other questions for now?
Not at this point.
Okay, sounds good. I'll go ahead and hop in here. Again, just as a reminder, it is a cloud-based system, so you can use any device you want. Every crew member will have their own username and login. So from an accountability perspective, you can see who's doing what. And this is kind of what the system looks like. So when you log in, it'll bring you to your home station. I'm at station 1 right now. That's my default for my user profile. Obviously, if I'm filling in at another location, I can always change my homepage to view another station or another location at our agency. For today, I'm just going to stay on station 1. And here at station 1, on my homepage, you'll see 3 sections. The schedule is all of the checks I have due today. The alert section in the middle is any open alerts or open issues that we currently have. And then the journal is a digital whiteboard. And you can post any communications here, like pass on reports, training updates, trying to think what else, station tours, things like that you'd like the crews to know about. So when we log in today, we're going to focus on the critical asset module. And from a crew member's perspective, it's really easy. When they log in, they'll just see an additional asset box here, and anything that's due will pop up in green for them to complete. But before we hop into that for the crews, I wanted to show you on the admin side our asset list page. And this is really the page that you would probably use most often to administer your assets. And it really is the full list of everything you own in the agency. So you can have any type of assets that you'd like. You can see here, these are all examples that we've loaded into the system. So, AEDs, electronics, extinguishers, furnaces, hose, hydrants, monitors, radios, roofs, so tick cameras. So whatever you guys would like to track, we just create that type of asset in here. So you're unlimited in terms of the amounts and the types of assets that you can add. When you look at a certain type, I'm looking at my hydrants right now. For each asset, you'll see on this page some of the high-level information about it, who it's assigned to, the type of asset, description, manufacturer, in this case, the size, the initial cost, the model, serial number, ID number, the source. I'll just scroll down a little bit here. Over to the right, you can see the vendor, the ISP tags. For our hydrants, we have an address of where they're located, the status, and then some important dates as well. So manufacturer date, purchase date, expiration date, and all the fields up here above, we can filter by those and sort by them. So if I click on expiration date, I can see I have 3 hydrants that are expired, 1 that's coming up for expiration that needs to be replaced. So all that information up here at the top is sortable, and you can see that at any point. I'll go ahead and just grab a couple here, and we'll pretend that maybe we went out for the day and we did a hydrant inspection on these, and I want to log that event for both these hydrants. I can come up to batch, and basically this is a bulk event is what I'm going to do. So you can do a batch log. You can also batch reassign or batch do a batch status change if you ever need to edit the information or retire these items. For right now, I'm going to do a batch log to log an event for these. And the first thing you do is just select what type of event you're completing. So these are all the events we have in the system. You can see we have 2 specific events for hydrants, which are the flow test and the routine inspection. So I'm just going to do a routine inspection for these, and we're going to say they all checked out and they passed all the checks. The checks you see here, these are all customized as well. So whatever steps that you would like your crews to complete during an event, we can add those in here. And if they want to add any notes, they can do that. They can add a location of where they completed this event. Obviously for hydrants, they're each going to be at a different location. So we'll just leave that as unassigned for right now. And we'll go ahead and log that. So once you log any event in the system, it's going to go into the history for those items. And while we're at it, I'm just going to go ahead and do a couple other things here. Let's change the status of this hydrant. Let's say, let's say it looks like it was out for repair before. So let's say active, it's gone back into active status. Maybe a car hit it and that's why it's out for repair. And now we got it fixed and it's back in status. So I just updated that. And if I scroll over to the right, we'll see that now the status is updated to active there. And let's see, is there anything else I want to do? Yeah, let's just leave it there for now. And anytime you want to see the history for a particular asset, so let's say maybe the city comes in, or your grant funder comes in and says, hey, I want the history and the the current status and the location for a particular asset that we gave you. You can just come in, and if you don't already know the asset, you can just type in or scan in the serial number or the ID number, and that'll just pull up that asset for you right here. And we can click into the details tab. And the details is where we'll see the full history for this particular asset. So again, we're looking at a hydrant. Here's the serial number we gave it, the internal ID we gave it. Over here on the left, this is all the high-level information, including the total maintenance costs that we've had for this hydrant. We can see any scheduled events as well. And then over on the right-hand side, this is the history. So you can select, you can select whatever date range you'd like. So we'll just say, let's just look at this month. And when you view that history, it's going to load up any events that have been completed in this month. And the top two are the ones that I just did. So we did a status change where we moved it from out to repair. And then we also did a routine inspection. And these were the different checks that we completed as part of that routine inspection.
Hey, Ryan, we have a few really great questions coming in. It'd be a great time to show some of these examples.
Awesome.
Yeah, one customer on the phone would like to know, what does this work for tracking fitness equipment and repairs and maintenance for that equipment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll just kind of point this out here in the settings. So here in the settings, we have an asset types. So you can literally track any type of asset that you'd like. I don't think we have like gym equipment or fitness equipment right now. So if I wanted to add a new type called fitness equipment, we can just do that. And then you can see here, it'll add it to the bottom of our list. And if I want to rearrange that, or I'm sorry, it's up here. If I want to rearrange that, kind of the order of these categories, I can just kind of drag and drop those as well. So that's what we would do to create that that asset type. And then kind of going back to a previous question, in order to add our assets in that we have, you can go to the settings and add assets. And you can either add one asset. So if you want to just type in, the information for one, you can do that. Or if you want to add multiple, you can do that too. And it's more of a kind of a table view. Or like I mentioned, if you do have assets, you can always send us the list, and then our team can load those in for you as well. So that's how you would actually load in those assets. And we can do that really quick for one of our fitness equipment items. Gosh, I'm trying to think of let's say Bowflex,
Peloton.
Yeah, there you go. That's another good one. So we'll do a Bowflex. We'll just say model B. So you can come in here and just input all the information. If we want to give it a serial number, and maybe our internal ID is B01 for Bowflex. Our initial cost was, I don't know what they go for these days. We'll say $1,500. Purchase date is today. We'll put manufacturer date today. And if you want to, these are all optional fields, so you don't have to input this. But if we want to add an expiration date, maybe we replace all of our Bowflexes every 5 years. We can just put that in, and then you can assign it. So probably for this one, you assign it to a location like station 1. And if you have any receipts or other files you want to attach, you can do that too. And then we'll just save that. And that'll now be loaded into the system. So kind of going full circle here, if I go back to my asset list page, which was the page I was on a little bit earlier, And I'm going to reset my view here. And you can see here, this is again, all of our different assets we have, kind of where they're assigned, but I can filter this by type, and I'll just look at our, where's it at? Our fitness equipment. And there you go. So now we have our one asset that we just added here in the system. And to answer your question, you can log events on this too. So if you want to track maintenance events or repairs, we would need to set up those events in the system so you could log them. Actually, I think we might have a generic repair event. Yeah, we do. So just as an example, let's say we did a repair on the equipment, replaced a handle on it. We can say where it took place, and if there's a cost, we can input the cost and log that event. And so all those type of events are going to go into the history like I showed before. So if I click into the details tab here, we'll just look at the history for these dates, and we're gonna just have the one event because that's all I've logged so far. Oh, I'm sorry, we have two because I assigned it as well. So any assignments, when you reassign things, those will also get added to the history so you can see where they moved. But there's that one repair event as well that we just completed. So
Awesome.
I hope that was helpful. Sorry, long answer to that question, Liz, but kind of wanted to show some of the other functionality. Was there another one?
Yeah, I have a couple more. Pat wants to know, is it possible to share a default build out for a check and then we can adjust it as needed?
Yeah, absolutely, Kat. We have like standards, kind of best practices that we can share, especially for common things like hose inspections, for example. In NFPA checks like that, we have guidelines and best practice checklists that we can share with you, and then you can customize those. And while I'm talking about it, I might as well show you kind of how that works. So here in the events section of the settings, this is where we set up all those different events. So basically you can tell us what events you want. This is like a generic inventory check. And then for each category or type, I should say, each type of asset, we can have different checks for that asset. So if it's an electronic inventory check, you would complete these two tasks. If it was a radio, you would have these tasks, etc. I'll just kind of scroll down here so you can see. These are kind of generic ones, but here's, if I go down a little bit, like here's an annual hose test. And obviously this just applies to our hose assets, but we can customize the different tasks we see. So for example, I'll just say, I'm just going to put new task just to kind of show you here. But we can add whatever checks you want. So going back to your question, we can pre-populate this with kind of the standard checks, but then we can always customize it and delete things or add in other checks that you guys would want for your agency. So that's kind of how we set these events up. And once we have the events set up, the other nice thing is we can schedule these. So depending on the frequency your department performs these checks, let's say, for example, maybe you do your hose tests every year, we can schedule this event once a year. So on your schedule, it'll just pop up, and I'll show you that too. We have a full schedule page. So as an administrator, you can go in and you can see all the events that are due right now. And I'm just gonna close some of these windows I have so I can see a little better here. And I'm gonna zoom out. There we go. So you can see here are all of our assets, and what's nice in the schedule is it'll show you the different events that we need to complete and when they were due. And so all these ones in red are actually overdue that we still need to complete. And you can filter all this information. So maybe today we just want to look at our, what do we want to look at? Our hose testings. And we want to see if we have any hose tests that are coming up. So I can filter that, and I can see for these, 3 sticks of hose, I have hose testings that are coming up, and here are the due dates for them. And, if you go out to the field and you complete these, we can log the event. So we can say for this stick of hose, I completed that event. And remember in our settings, I was showing you the different tasks we had set up, and I created that one new task that I customized. So there's that new task I added. And anytime as you're going through and doing your checks, one thing I haven't showed yet is if there's something that's wrong or broken, we can set an alert on it by clicking this red yield icon. So let's just say this is past pressure testing. So let's just say it failed the pressure testing. We can set an alert, and when we log this event, because we had an issue, it's going to create an alert notification. And if there's any pictures, like if we're on our phone or an iPad, we can use the camera and attach pictures if we'd like, or add another description. But based on the type of asset, it's going to be sent to the appropriate recipients. So in this case, it's just going out to me, but you can have other required recipients and they would just show up right under my name. You can also add optional people as well. So if you want to maybe send this to your manufacturer or the maintenance shop, whoever you want that alert to go to, you can copy them. And when we send the alert, it's going to be sent via email and text out to these folks. So we'll go ahead and set that alert. Obviously that check comes off of our schedule because we just completed the host test, and it'll just show up again in a year or so when that's due again. But that alert, when it gets sent off to the administrators, going back to our homepage here, any alerts are also going to show up here on our homepage that are assigned to this station. So that stick of hose I just did was not assigned to a vehicle at the station, which is why it's not showing up. But you can see here some other examples of open alerts that we have. And what's nice as an administrator is you can go in and add comments to these alerts to keep the crews updated back at the station about what's going on. So, let's say for this electronic, just received parts, we'll have it fixed next week and back to the station. So any updates like that, you can keep the crews in the loop with what's going on and just just attach those comments or updates right there. And then when this issue gets resolved and we have the electronic returned back to the station, we can just close out the alert, returned item. We can add files or other costs, and then we can close it. And once it's closed, that alert will disappear off the crew member's view because they don't need to see it anymore, right? But all those alerts will get archived in the system. So from a historical perspective, you can always go back in and see a full history of those alerts anytime you need to. So I'll pause there, Liz. Kind of another long-winded answer to a question, but as I'm answering the question, I'm trying to show a little bit of other functionality with it. Were there any other questions I can answer for now?
Yes, I've got one more that this would be a great opportunity to jump into this. We've got, can you make a correction to a batch log? For instance, if a wrong date was entered.
Oh, good question. And I apologize. I might need to run that by our team, because I know in some areas of the system we call it a back edit. You can do a back edit, but I don't believe you can for an asset check. So I think I'll stick with that for my answer right now. But whoever asked that, if I find out something different, I'll let you know. Thanks, Ryan. Sure. Anything else, Liz? That's it for now. Carry on. Okay, great. Thanks. I'm going to go back to the asset list one more time just to show one last example here. Another common one for assets, particularly for fire agencies, is your hose testing. And when I was in the full schedule a moment ago, I did one event for a stick of hose. But you can also come in here and do bulk events for things like that too. So if I want to pull up all of my hose, I can see that here. I just have a few sticks here in our demo environment, but you can select all the ones you did an event on, and we can do a batch log, which is another bulk event. And in this case, I'll just do an annual hose testing and go through and complete those. If we did those at a particular location, maybe like the maintenance shop, we can log it there, add the cost, and then log that event. So it really is pretty easy to add events and to log those, especially if you have multiple items at once. With that bulk event functionality, it's really simple to complete those in one big group. So I just wanted to point that out. The other nice thing on the admin side is all the reporting that goes with this. And I showed you how you can click into the details for one asset and see the full history for it. The other nice thing is you can do here in our logs and reports section, you can do full, I call them holistic reports. So for example, if you want to see every, let's pick an event here, every host testing we've done for the last, well, let's just go all the way back to the beginning of this year. So every host test we've done for this year, you can pull that up and it'll show you every host test you've completed, who completed it, the serial number and the ID number of that stick of hose that it was completed on, and the status of it. So really, it makes reporting very simple. You can come in here and export that or print it. So another common example or use case for this is for your ISO ratings. One of the requirements around hydrants is the hydrant testings and the flow testings and when those were last completed. So, when the ISO auditors come in to collect that data, you can just come in and say, I want to pull up all of our hydrant routine inspections for, I'll just keep it out this year, but you can go as far back as you need to. So I'll pull those up and it looks like we've done 5 inspections so far this year. And then just like before, I can print it or export it into an Excel file or a PDF file if I want to. So that's a really nice report. Basically, we call it the logs, and it's all of the historical events that you completed across all the different assets. Another one here is our expiration date report. And I mentioned this very early on, but when you're doing your budgeting and your planning, one of the challenges we hear for departments tracking their assets on spreadsheets is it's really hard to predict when things are going to be expiring and to plan for that. And that's really the purpose of this report. Let's say, as an example, you're doing a 3-year budget planning. You can go out 3 years and pull up the results. And this is going to show you every asset that's going to be expiring before this date. Some of the assets, the ones in red, are already currently expired. And then if I scroll down, the other ones, if it's an orange, that means it's going to be expiring within 6 months. And all the other ones down here aren't expiring yet, but they will be expired by that date we selected up above. So again, you can export this into Excel and then calculate the overall budget request that you need to have over the 3 years to kind of replace those different items. One last standard report I'll point out is our cost report. And if you ever have any lemons, is what I call them, assets that maybe are always broken and seem like you're just dumping a lot of money into them to continuously repair them and keep them in service, you can use this report to help identify those. We can look at all types of assets or one particular type. I'll just pull up everything here. And over here on the right, there's 2 columns, the initial cost and then the maintenance cost. So I usually sort by the maintenance cost, and that'll show you all of the assets with the highest repair costs. And potentially what you could do is essentially replace these, right? If these are costing you too much, it might be time to just replace them with a new one, and that might actually be less expensive than having to maintain and repair these. So that's what this report is done, or sorry, used for. It'll also tally that up, your initial cost and your total maintenance cost, over here into a total cost column. So if you want to sort by that, you can do that as well. All right, I touched on a lot of what administrators can do in the system. If you have any assets and asset events that are performed by your crew members, you can also assign them and schedule those events. So when a crew member logs into their station, if there's anything that they need to perform, for example, maybe it's just an inventory check, right? Once a quarter or once a year, you want them to just verify that they have all the equipment that they should have. You can schedule those, and they'll just pop up right here on their checks that are scheduled. They can click into it, and it'll show them the different assets that they have something scheduled for. So we have a tick camera, a couple drones, a jaws of life, and obviously in the real world, you would have other asset categories as well that you're tracking. But the crew members can just come in, they can mark these as present or not present. If it's missing, we're just going to say these are present. I'll mark one as not present just so you can see what happens there. And then we'll complete these events. So for the first ones, this is just a basic inventory check. So we don't have any tasks we need to mark off. We're just confirming that we have it. For our drone, we do have a couple of tasks. So we need to make sure it's present, and then we need to make sure the battery is charged. On our second drone, this is the one that I marked as missing. And when something is marked as missing, what's nice is it'll create an automatic alert for the administrator that that item is no longer present. So that way you can kind of start the search process of, trying to relocate that item and find out where it is. And then our jaws of life, we have a couple of checks for this one. Is it present and is it working properly? So we'll go ahead and log those checks. Because we had the missing item, it's going to set this alert for us, and that'll go out to the appropriate recipients. So we'll go ahead and set that. And then once we're finished with those, we'll see we have no more scheduled checks, and I can go back to my homepage, and we'll see my asset checks are now down to 0, which is kind of the goal for the day, is to always get your checks down to 0. So we're good there. And if I look at my asset alerts, we're going to see that for that one drone, I set the asset on, I set the alert. It was on engine 1, and we can see it's not present, and that alert notification has gone out to our administrators to help look for that. So that's kind of how the crew members would do their asset checks. That's all optional. So if you don't have any, any checks your crews are doing, then no need to worry about this. But if you would like your crews to perform checks on certain assets, then that's how we can set that up for you. And in addition to the scheduled checks, they can also do as needed checks. So let's just say, I don't know, in the middle of the day, we get back from a fire, as an example, or a call, and we have an issue with one of our assets. We can select what event we want to do. So maybe we're just doing, I don't know if I have like a routine inspection in here. So I'll just select like an inventory check here. And maybe our iPad is broken. So we can select that asset and log an inventory check. We can say it's present, but that we have an issue with it. So, iPad screen cracked. Not that that ever happens, right? But we'll say that happened here, and we'll log that issue. And then you can see for our electronics, these are all the required recipients it's going to go out to. And we'll set that alert, and they'll be notified of that issue. So that's the other nice thing is, even if you don't have scheduled checks, the crew members can notify the right people on an as needed basis when issues do arise with those different assets. All right, Liz, well, I covered a lot there. I'll check in one last time just to see if there's any questions I can cover, but I think from a high level, that was a pretty good summary of the critical asset module and the different features and functionality within it. But any other questions I can answer?
I don't have anything specifically. I'm wondering if we could maybe just show how easy it is to get started. Like, what does it look like when somebody wants PS Tracks to help? Do they get handed a spreadsheet or like an Excel document, or how do we load those assets for customers so we can show just how easy we make it?
Yeah, great question. And actually, maybe I'll hop back to, let's see if I can find the right slide here. Sorry about that, kind of hopping around. So yeah, just kind of hopping back to, to this slide. In terms of kind of what we do is we build the whole module for you. So if you would like to purchase the module, what we do is we do a kickoff meeting to start, and our build team essentially will meet with your team and say, here's the information we need from you. And at that point, all you have to do is just email us your documentation, and it can be in any format that you have. For assets, it's usually a spreadsheet, or you may have another system that we will export it from. Those are kind of the two most common examples for asset inventory lists. So you can just email us those documents. And once we receive those, our build team will set up the module. We'll import all those assets for you and set up the different events and the different schedules that you want to have completed in the system. Once we have it set up, we'll test it and share it with your administrators so they can look at it. And if there's any adjustments or changes we need to make, kind of little final tweaks, we'll make those for you. And then once it's all ready to go, we'll roll it out to the rest of your department whenever you would like to. Obviously, we're on your schedule, but whatever timing makes sense, we'll be with you to help roll it out to the crews as well. So that's kind of the implementation process. As I mentioned before, usually that takes about 4 to 6 weeks for us to complete.
No worries. And Lori would like to know, does any format include old access databases?
Oh, good one, Lori. Good question. As long as we can get it out of it, right? That's the key. If you can get it out of it, that's great. Or what we've had some agencies do in the past is they'll give our team access, and then we can try to go in and export that. So I personally don't know if we've done an access database before. I would guess we probably have. I know we've had some departments literally send us just like sheets of paper, you know, like printed paper, and then our build team will get it loaded in. So yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem, but we'll work with you on that to get that data in.
Great. And then Ryan, can you touch on how asset inventory can coordinate with existing or new barcode or QR tags on equipment?
Yeah, sure. So PS Tracks, we don't provide any of the hardware for barcodes or QR codes. We're hardware agnostic, so you can use whatever barcodes and QR codes you would like. Obviously, you can use like a Bluetooth scanner to scan those in. I'll show you in the system, like as an example, if I go back to the asset list, we have this section here, which is meant for barcode scanners. So if you have multiple items, you can scan multiple items here. And then basically, I'll just show you an example. I don't have a barcoder hooked up on my computer here, but basically you just, scan the different items you have like that, and it'll just filter the results and pull those items up for you. And then you can do whatever you need to from there. Like I've showed before, you can reassign assets. So let's say, this stick of hose, we want to reassign from the maintenance shop over to engine one. Let me just grab engine one here. Oops, I need to change my station. Apparatus, engine one, there we go. you can reassign it. So yeah, basically you can scan multiple items, and then once you've scanned them, it'll filter them out, and then you can perform whatever events you need to at that point.
Super. I've got another question that's somewhat off topic, but I think it's still a little relevant. How do you get the next oil change date to show on the schedule screen for engine 1?
Yeah, we could basically we could load in your vehicles as assets, right? As a vehicle asset, and you could create an event called oil change and schedule that on whatever frequency you'd like that to be scheduled. And then once that's scheduled, it'll just pop up. It'll pop up in a couple of places. It'll pop up here if you wanted to on the home page for that vehicle as an asset check. So it could say, you know, engine 1 needs an oil change. It'll also pop up in your schedule as well over here. So I don't have any oil change events in here, but for your mechanics, for example, they'd be able to filter by like a particular apparatus if they wanted to. Let's see, like, you know, here's engine 1 as an example. So they could pull up any events for engine 1 and then filter that by the event type, which would be oil check. And they'd be able to see if there was any oil changes that were needed to be completed. You could also do this for like PM schedules, excuse me. So for your preventative maintenance, if you do that every 6 months, for example, or whatever it is, you can schedule that, and then the mechanics could come in and basically pull up their work list, right, of what PM schedules and what oil changes they needed to be that needed to be completed.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Also, can
Sure.
you show the hydrant feature?
Yeah, so let me go back to our assets again, asset list. So hydrants are just another asset type, right? So we basically load in all of your different hydrants here, and you can have all the information about them, the location, the address, all those different attributes about each hydrant. And I'm guessing what you're maybe what the question is referring to is like a flow test, because I didn't show that. So let's say for, let me back up a second. I just selected this one hydrant here, and let's pretend we did a flow test on it. We can just log an event, and we'll select our flow test. And then you can see here, we have different required information that has to be completed as part of that flow test to log it. And I apologize, I am not, Liz called me a subject matter expert, but I'm not a SME on hydrant flow tests or the information that's collected. So I apologize. I'm just going to kind of type in some random numbers here just to kind of complete this quickly. But basically, you would go through, you would input your different information that you're collecting here, and log that event. And that would complete that flow test for you. And just like all the other events I showed, that flow test is going to go into the history for that item. So if I go to our history, and I'm just going to pull up this month, we're going to see here at the top, there's our most recent event that I just completed, which is the flow test and the different information that we collected for that. And so again, this is the history for just one asset. But if you wanted to go into your logs and pull up all of your flow tests that you've done for the whole department, you can just come in and select the hydrant flow test event, select your date range. So I'll just pull them up for this year. And it looks like that's actually the first one we've done this year in our demo site. Let me see if I go back a little bit, if I can go back a little bit further. Maybe get some more history here for us. There we go. So I went back to the beginning of 2021, and it looks like we have 15 flow tests here in our demo site. So yeah, so that's how you could see the full history. And like I pointed out before, you can export that or print that if you need to.
Great. Thank you, Ryan.
If you'd like more information about the module, just let us know. We're happy to send you a price proposal, or if your team would like a one-on-one virtual demo, we do those a lot where you can invite other stakeholders and we can answer questions about how the module, either the critical asset module or other modules work. We're happy to share other modules as well. So just let us know if that would be of interest and kind of the best way to get a hold of you, phone, text, email, and we'll reach out afterwards to get that for you. So I think that's all I have. Liz, before I hand it over to Liz, here on the closing slide, for those of you that might follow PS Tracks, we recently announced a new sponsorship with Revital Colorado. And if you aren't familiar with Revital, I definitely recommend going to their website and checking them out. They're actually a nonprofit organization that helps first responders deal with just the intensity of what you guys deal with, right? The kind of the trauma of the job and some of those things by proactively providing different outdoor activities and different kind of relationship building events to the front line. So we partnered up with them, and we're really happy to just kind of help spread the word about Revital Colorado and share in their mission. So just wanted to point them out. If you have a chance, or if you know someone that might be in of need of that type of service, feel free to pass that along to them. And more to come on that in the future. We'll be sponsoring some events with them moving forward. So Liz, I think that's all I got. I'll pass it over to you to close out.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Great job on the presentation. If you guys have any other questions or anything, feel free to reach out to our team. We're happy to answer anything, hop on a demo if we need to, or a training session with you all to help you set things up. No big deal. And then also we will send out a recording of this webinar to everybody so you can share with your teams as you see fit. So it is top of the hour. We promised to be done in an hour. So we're going to go and hope you all have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.